Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome into the Global Intelligence Update. This week, we've got a great guest with us. He's joined us many times before, so if this is your first time, please go back on the older versions or the older Global Intelligence Update and go have a view at what content is shared previously. But today, we've got Ian Hatton. And for those that don't know who Ian is, let me just give you guys a brief introduction and we'll get into the session right away. So, our speaker has been known to disrupt his audiences around the world and is notorious for awakening dreams. He's a conscious leadership expert who has trained and inspired thousands of leaders from 105 countries. He's a keynote speaker widely loved for his genuine, warm stage presence and transformative message. The Professional Speakers Association of South Africa has introduced him into the Educators Hall of Fame. He is the founder of Total Morpheus. Those programs are changing the face of leadership as we know it. When he's not mentoring the next generation of conscious leaderships, you will find him savoring a gourmet coffee, geeking out over the latest hi-fi equipment, or enjoying time in nature with his tribe or like-minded leaders. With the session, the best discussion I have ever facilitated, Ian is about to let you get morphized. I hope I pronounced that correct, Ian.
Yeah, it's somebody made this up. One of my team members who said, "Oh, a session with Ian is a session where you get Morpheused." So yeah, it's
No,
kind
that's
of what that's
awesome.
about.
Thanks for joining us, Ian.
Mm.
Really
Thank you,
looking forward to
Chris.
it.
Really great to be here again. Just a little extra piece for this audience is that I've been a gold member since 2018. So a gold Circle of Excellence member since 2018. So I've been around with Mike and Lundy for a while. And I'm now a lifetime member, of course, because of that. So yeah, so very good.
Congrats.
So I had a fascinating thing happen on the weekend. After a month, 5 weeks of planning, I gathered together my long-term leadership crew, a conscious leadership crew, which is people who are on a program. Some of them are alumni from 5 years ago, 4 years ago, but it's a bunch of people who have been on long-term programs with me, and some of them are current. They're still on their initial 2 years of this longer-term conscious leadership program. And the way I regard that is that conscious leadership is based on self-leadership. So basically, a conscious leader is somebody who has become conscious of themselves, and that's made them more conscious of their people and the impact and what those that they're trying to influence. So that's the journey that these people have been on. And some of them are in non-profit, some of them are in politics, some of them are in business. It's quite a cross section. And we did this exercise on the weekend. I'm not going to tell you yet what it is. I'm going to get to that a little bit later on. And I came away from the session feeling like it is the most profound session I've ever facilitated. And I've been, as you've heard, facilitating around the world for quite a while. And it's fascinating that this would happen, at the age of 62, that I finally facilitate something that really works. No, that's not quite true. But anyway, you see, I do have the British humor, just in case you're wondering, Claire and others. Yeah. Um, so my DNA, by the way, and I've had the test. I've had two different tests. Is my DNA is primarily Celtic, with bits of British and Western European and tiny little bit of Catalonian, believe it or not. Anyway, so we did this session, and what I wanted to just start with is a bit of a discussion and have everybody participate if you can. And it's this: what is the best question you've ever been asked? What is the best question you've ever been asked? Now, I was asked this question by somebody wishing me happy birthday on LinkedIn a month ago, and I went and had a look, and I eventually said to him, the one that I'm going to choose this time is, what if nothing's wrong? And it doesn't say that nothing's wrong, just to be clear. It's what if nothing's wrong? That question about 10 years ago transformed my life. So just by, not playing the blame game, not going for, a therapeutic approach to everything, but actually going that. So I'm just kind of wondering, anybody, what is, even if it's not the best, what's a good question you've been asked?
Well, yeah, I had what was the turning point before a big change?
So just say it again.
What was the turning point before a big change? Like, what
Oh,
was the wake-up call?
beautiful, beautiful, brilliant question. Because now it makes us understand. Because one of the problems is that very often, in fact, I mean, hopefully it's irrelevant what I'm about to say, whether you're a fan of Bill Gates or not. But I used to work for Microsoft more than 25 years ago, about, and one of his favorite things was to say, "We learn nothing from success; we only learn from failure." And very often we make assumptions about what our success was based on. But when we analyze failure, we actually learn a lot more. And Jeffrey, I love your question because the turning point means what was that specific point? And I think that's a brilliant question. Let's hear from a few more.
In a similar way as yours, and I think it was, what if it could work?
Right.
What if it could work? And then they're turning into the positive side of it and making me think that, I was looking at the negatives and, they kind of say, what if it could work?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
actually, yeah, that's
I
exactly
love that one,
what
Claire.
I've got on my
Sorry,
computer.
Stephanie. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Ian, man. Yes, I needed to cut in there, Claire, because this is actually a little note that I've put on my, um, on my laptop here. What if all works out? Exactly. So this is the
Mm,
next question.
mm. I love that. I don't know if any of you have read Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, but he kind of asks that question. And my partner and business partner, she does takes people through a marketing journey. Some of you will have met her, come across her, Marie-Therese Leroux, and she decided to take her own business through her own marketing journey. The questions that she asks, and she said, "Well, what's working, what's not working?" Only to discover that about 80% is working. It's the 20% that's not working that's holding her back. And yeah, I love these questions. This is so cool. So Stephanie, I love that you've got that on your laptop, by the way. And by the way, I used to have that "what if nothing's wrong" on my screen at home as well. Stephanie, what's the impact been of that question?
It absolutely just it's a positive impact. It shifts the energy so much. If you read it out, if something major is going to happen, or if you feel anxious about something, and I just look at that one, if there's something big coming up, this all came out when some big changes happened in my business and some big positive stuff, and then this question just came up and it helped so much with anxiety and just shifts the energy and makes it much more positive. Because it can
Brilliant.
work out and it does work out, and then you need to
Yeah.
just focus on that.
I love it. I love it. And it's that energy shift, isn't it? I love it. So
Absolutely.
I'm going to come back to your question a bit later. I'm going to go to Corin's question, and that is, there are no failures, only lessons. So how does that come as a question, Corin? Because I love the concept, but how was it phrased as a question?
No, it wasn't. I was actually responding to somebody who commented about
Okay.
I just that's
Okay.
something that has always come up with me is like in all the sort of the journey that I've been on, and because people frame things as, oh, it's a failure, it's a failure. It's not a failure. You've learned something from it, and you
Exactly.
only grow from those. So sorry, not a
Wow.
question.
A comment based on a question, which is just as good. Thank you, Corin. Love it. Love it. Anybody else? What's a great question you've been asked?
I heard something really good this morning, actually, and it's just stuck with me, and I've told a few people about it. And it was just a little clip on socials, but it basically said, if there was an audience sitting watching a movie of your life right now, what would they be sitting on the edge of their seat going, just do it? Yeah. And I thought it was really good. Or don't do it.
Wow. Wow. That is absolutely brilliant. I love it. Wow, yeah, exactly. That's the kind of thing. And the sort of movie of your life, or yeah, but the edge of the seat is the bit that just kind of drew me into your question. Love it. Absolutely love it.
So the question
Anybody
that I
else
hope,
been asked a good question? Sorry, go ahead,
yeah,
Stephanie.
yeah, man. The thing, the first question that actually came into my mind when you asked this, it's not a deep philosophical or deep conscious question, but the best question that I ever had, I think, was actually about 10 years ago when I got the opportunity to start this business. So the question was, would you be interested to become the distributor in South Africa? And this was a big question and something not at all in my field and nothing that I actually thought of or something. It's just came up and that made the change. So that question, just the opportunity of that question and to answer that question, because I had to go back and think about it or pray about it. And then the answer that I got was, if you don't do it, somebody else will. And that was just, the answer. So went back the next day and said, okay, let's do it. And that's where I then come back to the previous question from the movie and sitting there and are you going to do it or are you not going to do it? Why don't you do that? And things going through your mind just because of that one question and opportunity. Then at that time I didn't have the question of what if all works out. But I had the answer, if I'm not going to do it, somebody else will. So that actually gives you the answer that it will work out in the end somehow.
Wow. Wow, I love it, Stephanie. That's absolutely brilliant. And I see, Jeffrey, you've added a question in the chat here about what can I learn from this? And that is always a valid question, is that no matter what happens, there's always something to learn. And I think of some of my biggest failures, my deepest depressions, they were absolute turning points in my life where I learned so much. Yeah, absolutely. So Karen has added over here now, uh, why aren't you why aren't you one? Okay, still in the clothing industry, always wanted to be a lawyer. Oh, why aren't you a lawyer? Why aren't you one? Well, tell us more about that question and what the impact was, Karen.
So I was at a guest house in Vicksburg and met a lady who was coming to stay there, and we were having coffee. And she told, we were talking about what we do, and she told me she was a lawyer. And I had been in the clothing industry back then for 25 years and hating it. Been retrenched 4 times. It was horrible. And she told me she was a lawyer, and I told her, oh, I always wanted to be a lawyer. And she said, why aren't you one? So I then told her all the usual excuses, it takes too long to study and it's too expensive and I'm a single mother and I'm almost 40 because I was 39 that year. And she then said to me, I'm going to tell you my story, and when I'm done, I want you to stop making excuses. And then she told me that she was a she was a tea lady in all white, all male, all Afrikaans law firm in Pretoria, and she put herself through UNISA. And at the time that I met her, she was a partner in that firm. And she was a black single mother. So that for me was like, oh.
Wow, I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for being vulnerable and adding how old you were there. And by the way, my big turning point was also kind of 39. I was in the IT industry for 19 years, after having done a year of youth work and other things as well. And then I suddenly became aware of just how dysfunctional leadership was, including my own, just to be really clear. It was including my own. So I did a master's, started in 2002 with a master's in organizational leadership. And in September that year, left Microsoft. And yeah, it's the same sort of story. I was 39 years old, and had to transition, and it's been a rough ride. I won't deny it, but it's actually been. I could not imagine myself still in the IT industry. It would be such a disaster for my personality and who I am and my wiring. Yeah. Okay, so I want to change the tack slightly and just ask two questions briefly that I'm gonna. It doesn't. We'd have to have a long discussion, but these kinds of questions, and these are absolutely brilliant questions. Who needs them? Who needs to be asked these questions?
Everyone.
At some point, we all probably should get those questions or ask ourselves those questions at some point.
Hmm. And Jeffrey?
Everyone. I think insights, big and deep insights, often follow a very good and deep questions.
Mm. And this actually wasn't exactly what I was going to ask next, but it's just come up for me, and I think it's critical. Um, what is the impact of these things as questions rather than statements?
Just makes you think.
Hmm. Completely agree with you, Claire. There's more, though, that I've discovered. But I agree with you. You're 100% right. That's the number one reason, but there's another reason.
It
I
can
think it
change
shifts the
your
energy.
The energy, thanks, Stephanie. Jeffrey?
the perspective. It
Yes.
changes the perspective.
There we go. Thank you. Self-realization. It challenges you. Now, the psychology of this, and yeah, of course, thank you, leaders, Corin. That's exactly why I ask these kinds of questions and the impact that I'm starting to have with those questions. And by the way, this tallies in with a session I did. I don't know if it was early this year or late last year, so you can always go back and look in the archives. But I did a whole session on how much more powerful my work has become since I've stopped playing the expert. And what apparently now I'm being lauded as an expert because I'm not playing the expert. If you can see that, there's something, it shifts the energy, as Stephanie has said. And the more I'm able to ask good questions, the more profound the insights that people have. But there's another piece of this: ownership. There's a beautiful theory that if you, well, let me just use a very basic, simple, stupid example, and that is if a teenager doesn't tidy their bedroom, is it because they don't know how? In other words, they're not competent, or is it much more of a commitment kind of thing, like a motivation or something like that? And what's really interesting is how much we will go in and say, tidy up, do this, do this, do this. So in other words, we are treating it as if they're incompetent, but it's not a competence issue. It's an ownership issue. Okay. But by asking all the right questions, and by the way, I've heard a little bit about this. I've spoken to somebody who was just out of her teens, and she said, the worst punishment I ever got from my parents wasn't being grounded. It wasn't anything like that. The worst punishment I ever got from my parents is when they sat me down and asked me all the difficult questions. That was the most uncomfortable thing because now I have to own it. I have to own my answers. I have to think of my responses. I have to put in ownership. And so there's something about when we ask a profound question that the other person now has to own it. So let me give you a simple example in that I often do when I'm training leaders, and I will talk about if somebody, let's say their performance is off track and they know how to do the job, okay? But let's say they used to submit their weekly report like clockwork and now for 2 weeks in a row they've missed it. If you try and tackle that by going, you must get your report in and you sort of finger wagging, you're actually going to disengage them further. It's going to get worse, not better. You might get the report, but you're not going to get the engagement. So what I rather say to them is, ask them about, what you've always been like clockwork. What's going on? And you may find out it's a personal reason or they had a setback with a client, or you don't know. So discovery is so important. But can you see what's also happening is they starting to think about what went wrong. And very often they haven't thought that. They may be feeling guilty or shame or all sorts of possibilities, but they haven't really thought through what's going wrong. And so, and then they say, oh, well, this is the problem. You say, oh, right. And how long is it going to take to fix that? Do you have a plan to fix it? When you've fixed it, will you be able to catch up on the ones you've missed? You just keep asking these questions and it just increases the ownership, ownership, ownership. Psychologically, when you go, you must do this, you must do this, you must do this, they feel you own it, not them. And so these profound questions are the things that actually change behavior. If we want to see behavior change, it's about asking profound questions. So, and yeah, Karen, you're absolutely right. It is about the iceberg principle, but it's not for us to go and poke under the iceberg. It's for us to ask the question so that they go excavating and say, oh, it's this, it's that, it's the other. And by the way, this might sound a little bit weird, but if you are in that situation where it is a sensitive topic, don't ask a why question. As in, why didn't you do this? Why are you behind? Because that feels accusatory. And you go, what got in the way? Now they've got to go and analyze what got in the way. They don't feel as threatened. So I try to, when it's a sensitive topic, I always try to not ask why. I try to translate all my why questions into what or how or when questions. They have a much more profound impact. Now, just to be really clear on this, purpose is about answering your why, so I'm not anti-why, okay? I'm saying in a coaching kind of environment, a why can feel like an accusation. And so we don't want to ask it that way, especially when it's a why that looks backwards. And we want to move people forwards. So, that's quite a critical thing. So let me tell you about the session that I did on the weekend. And then maybe we can, in a little while, you can ask me questions, and also we can come to some kind of conclusions about how this impacts the work you do. And I think that might be quite interesting. And I'm not saying I've got all the answers, by the way. I'm hoping that I've got the questions today more than the answers. So I think that might be useful. So the session that we did on the weekend comes back to the question that Chris asked right at the top of when I said, "What's the best question you've ever been asked?" And it's, who are you really? And the way we did it is, by the way, and let me just give a bit of context. I watched a video which was a conversation on a stage. And by the way, if you're interested, I'll pop it into the chat, or I'll send it to Chris and he can pop it into the post. It was an on-stage chat, sort of very unprepared, between Trevor Noah and Simon Sinek, and they talked a lot about friendship, which was really profound. But Trevor told a story of how he took a friend of his as his plus one to a big event. I don't know if it was like the Oscars or the Grammys or something like that. And everybody wanted to know what his friend did. And he said, no, it's his friend. So, but what does he do? No, he's my friend. You know, and we came up with this idea, which I'm sure many of you have heard before, is how would you introduce yourself if you cannot describe your job or your role or your qualifications? How would you introduce yourself if you cannot describe your job or your role or your qualifications? And I did, admittedly, I gave them about a month's warning. I then gave them some ideas to think about. And then I gave them finally, the day before, just a little reminder. So some of them took this quite seriously and did quite a lot of work. And what I thought I would do is share with you my answers to these questions. And by the way, I don't even believe mine is vaguely complete. I just want to be really clear about this. But I just want to show you this kind of thing that can be stimulated. And what I did is, I said, well, these are the areas I would like to cover. What am I? Who am I? Why am I? And how am I? So, and then when and where am I? I added that one quite late. So, these are, you might find some of these are very Lundy questions or Mike questions, but let me just take you through this. So, the what am I might sound like a really weird question. I mean, you're a human being, Ian. I mean, what else could you be, But this is what I answered. I said, I'm human and imperfect. I am a mind, a heart, a spirit, and a body. And then I said, to be clear, not a mind and a heart and a spirit in a body. I am a body. And the reason this distinction was so critical for me is that we often think of our bodies as transport systems for our minds and our hearts. And I'll give some thanks to Sir Ken Robinson for that quote. But there's something incredible about realizing that the body is part of who I am, and it's where my emotions are stored, and it's where when I listen to my body, I pick up a lot about what else is going on. So I am a body. I'm not just in a body. And then I say I'm logical, emotional, intuitive, and physical. And then I added this. I primarily experience my world through intuition. Intuition is the way I experience my world. And my best friend, by the way, says, and he's incredibly logical, he's an academic, and he says he primarily experiences his world through his emotions. And it's really fascinating to just be aware of this. This is who am I really? And it's an awareness, but it comes through asking these questions. So the second question I wrote is this, and this one I literally had people in tears. I don't expect it from you because you don't know me as well, but I literally had people in tears, and I specifically said, who am I discovering I am in 2025? And I said, I am in faith authoritative beyond understanding, which empowers me to be powerful beyond measure, which frees me to be liberated beyond words. And again, I don't know that I would have ever written this down if I hadn't been asked the question, you know? And then I kind of went, well, why am I? I'm here for connection, freedom, and impact. That's what I do. That's what I bring. I connect people with themselves. I connect with myself. I connect them with their people. That results in much more liberty for people to be who they really are and to bring their essence to the world. And that results in a massive impact, a leadership impact. So that's why I am. And then how am I is I have a process that, by the way, I followed the process for years and only then later realized what the process was. Um, but the process is this: I connect, I stimulate, and I challenge. And when I find I try to stimulate or challenge before connecting, it doesn't work. If I try and challenge before stimulating, it doesn't work. So what does that mean? I connect, real connection with people, stimulate. What another way of looking at the world? Probably through asking questions, by the way. And then challenge is, what are you going to do with that? So that's kind of that. And then the when and where am I is I'm a baby boomer come Gen Xer, right on the cusp, but I really believe I'm meant for Gen Y, Gen Z, and millennials. My biggest impact is by far those audiences. So that's the when. And the where is I'm global. I'm currently based in Pretoria, but I'm meant for the world. So that was my answer to that. And it had a profound impact on me. But I want to tell you, it paled compared to what my people answered. Their answers were so much even better and deeper than this. So I'm going to, because you're not going to know who they are, I'm going to read one or two of those. But before we do that, what are some of the thoughts of this idea of doing an exercise of how would you introduce yourself without talking qualifications, job, or even family roles?
I'd say
Thank
you
you.
you get to something more personal, something more tied to your core. Yeah, so something that's beyond the rules, as you just said.
Exactly, exactly. And what is that extra depth? What is that extra thing that we start to sense or feel?
I think I always start with I'm a survivor, I'm resilient, and can withstand adversity because of my life experience. I think I start with that. Lundy says I'm a warrior.
Mm. Is that WAR or WOR?
No, a bit of both at times. I had to think about it. No, the warrior, WA.
I was pretty sure that was what you meant, but sorry, I couldn't avoid the humor, so thank you.
Good.
Anybody else? What is the impact of introducing ourselves in this way, both on us identifying this and on the people that we are introducing ourselves to or describing ourselves to?
I guess you connect on an emotional level straight away. So you're going deep straight to that connection. And that's as soon as you connect on that level, that's it.
Mm,
You either love that person or you just, so as soon as the emotion comes in, that's
mm,
that connection that you build.
mm. Yeah. And we underestimate how emotional we are.
Mm.
Um, and for me, intuition is right there as well. So, yeah, and it just bypasses so many of the judgments, doesn't it? Yeah, somebody
Absolutely,
else.
yeah. That definitely makes me think now, once again, when I started, and you make me think because I don't introduce me like that, but this immediately came through when you asked this question. And I don't see myself at that, but if I then think more about it, then it sounds familiar or it sounds true. And I don't know if I will ever introduce myself like that, but somebody totally strange said to me, but you're a lifesaver. And that actually happened on the first mastermind that I attended with Mike and Landy, and how I got introduced. But it was somebody sitting next to me, and the question was asking, who are you, what you do? And I told them, and she said, oh my God, but you're a lifesaver. And when you now ask this question, because I never thought about that title or something like that, so you made me think, but it immediately came out. And now I understand that I don't know if I will ever introduce myself like that, because I feel it's huge. But if I look back at my life, and if I look at what I actually do, I can totally just agree that I'm saving lives. Yeah, that's the connection. That's the core of
Mhm.
who
I
I
think
am,
sometimes it's
actually.
having that reflection mirror from other people as well, which,
Yeah.
when you ask the question, you feel a little bit embarrassed of saying it. But, as people come up and, it kind of comes up. I mean, only a couple of days ago, somebody's called me the energy bomb. And I'm just thinking, my kind of subtitle was the energizer, but then it's gone another level, energy bomb now I am, and actually seeing other people, that reflection from other people will
Mm.
often show
We
you
should
how you
we should take it to
you
heart,
shrink.
hey? Right. Yeah, we should take it seriously then, eh? When it comes back to us.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a little piece I left off my introduction, by the way, because everybody that was doing this with the other day knows this already, but maybe you don't. And that is, why am I called Morpheus? Where does that come from, and what does it mean? And some of you have heard the story, some of you haven't heard the story, but what happened was this was a profound thing. It was 21 or 22 years ago. I was with a group of friends, and we'd kind of been talking or discussing a particular book that we'd all sort of read. And there was a place in this book where this guy said, I want to know who I am really. I know that my name is this or whatever, but who am I really? And we started saying, well, it could be something mythical, it could be a historical character, it could be like a Joan of Arc, or it could be, whatever it might be. It could be a cartoon character, it could be a movie character, it could be any of those. And I'm going to read you one in a moment from one of my leaders who runs a fairly large nonprofit. But before I do that, let me just tell you what happened is we got together a couple of weeks later and said, okay, so what did you discover when you started thinking about who are you mythically or mystically or whichever method you want to use? And the one person came up and said, no, well, she knows exactly who she is. And if any of you know this, you'll probably get it straight away. And if you don't, maybe don't look it up. Um, and she said she's River. Now, River is a character in Firefly and Serenity. One of those is a movie, one of them was a TV series, a science fiction thing. But River was absolutely deadly, especially if you touched her friends or family. Then she would just kill everybody. So, and this person, I kind of all went, yeah, we see the River streak in you, yeah, and that was quite something. And then somebody else was, like Gandalf. No, it wasn't Gandalf. It was Samwise. And then we said, no, but there's more to you than that. And he was like very embarrassed. And he said, well, one day he hopes to be Gandalf, kind of thing. And that was a really interesting, little concept from Lord of the Rings. They got to me and I said, no, clueless. I thought about this. I've, nothing, nothing, nothing. And River said to me, but it's so obvious, Ian, who you are. And I was like, what do you mean it's obvious? She said, you're Morpheus. I said, oh, I wish I was Morpheus. I'd love to be Morpheus. I could never be Morpheus. And they all turned to me and said, no, you are Morpheus. So Morpheus is, the Greek god of dreams, the one who awakens dreams. And that's what I do. Morpheus, if you later come across like the Sandman, which they say the Morpheus of the Matrix was based on, Morpheus is the one. He's not the political leader nor the military leader, but he advises both of them. He's not the hero. Neo is the hero, but he raises up the hero and the heroes. And also, he's the one who carries on believing when everybody stopped believing. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of me. So yeah, hi everybody. I am Morpheus. And it took me a while to be able to say that, by the way. So that is part of this profound thing of mythically or mystically, who are we? And that gets me to this point that I was getting to of like, why does this matter? And what is that depth that Jeffrey spoke about that it now takes us? And I think it and even goes beyond emotion, but thank you, Claire, for adding the emotion one because I think that's very central. I think it goes to essence. And I truly believe every one of us has unique essence, something unique that we can bring to the world that nobody else can. And while we're busy introducing ourselves as mothers and fathers and brothers and daughters and sons and as lawyers or whatever else we might be doing, we're actually not really getting to our essence. And people connect with essence. There's something incredible about connecting with essence. So let me read you the one. Oh, gee, this is such a long thing here. There's so many. It's a WhatsApp group, by the way. So yeah, this is the one I want to read you now. It's uh, yeah. His name is Sam, and he says this: "I am Sam. Sam, I am. Born on a farm in the foot of the Tsitsikamma Mountains in the Eastern Cape. Born by divine Kari, purpose and calling. I was not an accident, a mistake, or a nuisance. I was born because the divine decreed that I was necessary in this world, in my generation, and for future generations. A son of the soil. I love the outdoors. Nature is my sanctuary, my healing balm, my refuge from the storms of life. My alter ego is Optimus Prime. So from the Transformers, Optimus Prime. Um, Cosmic warrior for good. There's another warrior, Corin, not a warrior. Uh, I have an intuitive feel for people, sometimes wrong, most times right, and how I contribute something good to them. The elders in our village called it born with a helmet. The city people call it emotional intelligence. I call it life of meaning, impact, and legacy. I'm a product of life in an imperfect, broken world. I have hurts, habits, and hang-ups. I'm both a work in progress and a masterpiece. My life journey is all about bringing these parts together in harmony. This inner journey is disruptive, disturbing, harrowing, but ultimately well worth it. The glory of God is man fully alive, he said. I feel very alive when I'm busy wrestling with my parts. I value my personal space, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. I only welcome in those who I feel a connection with. I'm part of a tribe. I have individual friendships and a life partner who understands this about me. I'm not an island anymore. I have vital communities that I draw virtue, strength, and encouragement from. I'm a connector, hardwired to lead, hardwired and uniquely gifted to lead under peculiar and complex circumstances, solving problems, finding a way out and forward, rising to the challenge. These things inspire me. At times I'm impetuous and misguided, but nowadays I'm much more thoughtful. I'm a much more thoughtful, mindful, conscious leader. Sam, I am. I am Sam. Any thoughts?
Absolutely beautiful. I know, Sam. And it's exactly.
Yeah.
I was just allowing a little bit of time to absorb these profound questions, and I think to simplify life is important to define purpose, who I am, and what direction and how I spend my energy. But what you've been talking also too is how to speed up connection with people. Yeah, all that stuff. It's quite interesting. Quite interesting to polish or to distill further who are we.
Thank you. That is, yeah, exactly. And I really appreciate that feedback. And I think that's exactly what this is all about, is that asking ourselves these difficult questions. And I mean, why weren't we taught this at school, or why weren't we taught this when we were younger? I mean, it's just crazy, isn't it? These things can shape the rest of your life. Me discovering just over 20 years ago that I'm Morpheus dramatically changed my life. And, and continues to as I ask these questions at a deeper and deeper level. Corin.
I think what these questions ask of you is to discover your authentic self, because you can't show up properly for other people unless you are authentic yourself, and you can't ask other people to be authentic with you if you're not authentic yourself. I think they're very profound questions, those.
Isn't it interesting how the more authentic we become, the more we can recognize it in other people, or we can see when people are not authentic?
Yeah, I love that, and I love that because it's that multidimensional thing, isn't it, Roddy? That as we are looking at this, we realize things for ourselves, and then we become more authentic, and then we inspire authenticity in others. I see a lot of people get vulnerable. Once you get vulnerable, they'll get vulnerable, and some will be put off, but maybe they're not supposed to be your clients. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a polarizer sometimes, and I think it has profound
Yep.
multi-layered impact. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, they can feel threatened if you call someone out for not being authentic. They can, they have to process that and feel whatever emotion, mainly fear, I guess. I don't know. This person knows who I am, and that can be
Yeah, exactly.
polarizing, as you say.
Very polarizing. Yeah. And I think we forget how important that is as entrepreneurs, is that we are not here for everybody, and we need to be polarizing in those that will identify with this message. So, for example, I started off by talking about how I believe that great conscious leadership starts with self-leadership. And I often say this from the stage, and I can just see the profound impact where people I go into and I challenge them on this, and I go, if you're struggling in your leadership, there's probably something wrong with your self-leadership. And really start to kind of inquire down that path of how all great leadership, when I say great leadership, I mean, there's obviously people who would call it successful leadership, maybe financially successful or whatever, but all great leadership starts with self-leadership. And these kind of exercises and these kinds of questions, we start by asking them of ourselves, but over time, we start to ask them of others. And that is our influence. That is our profound impact on the world. So I kind of said I wanted to talk about, what are the best questions to ask, and I think we've kind of gone there. And to me, this one that I did over the weekend of how would you introduce yourself if you couldn't use all these other typical things that we rely on, that I think is pretty profound, but I don't think it's the only. I think you've all mentioned beautifully profound questions. And then I sort of said, well, who needs them? And it's self first, others second, I think is probably the answer. Why do we need them? Because they're so profound and they really change our lives. And then how should we ask them? I think again, you want to ask them in a way that doesn't feel so much threatening, but that is challenging. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's by asking, for example, what questions rather than why questions often will actually create that thinking space. And I've been doing a lot of thinking space exercises recently with a friend of mine who actually flew to Cape Town just so we could spend a weekend listening to each other because he was at a turning point in his career and his life. And after a while, he said to me, "Okay, now listening isn't enough. I need you to ask me. You need to ask me more questions." And so, some of these profound questions came up, and it was quite life-changing. So here's my question for you, and it's this: what do you want to do differently in your business, well, and your personal life and your business, based on the discussion we've had today?
Answer the questions.
Being more
You know,
open for me, I would say it's a process that I've been conscious about for the past few months. So authenticity is something for me, it's my core, being authentic, expressing who I am. And then I realized that even if I already felt quite authentic, I realized that there were layers that I wasn't expressing yet. So it's like I discovered another layer that I kept inside that I would like to start to express.
wow, that's very, very powerful. I want to, in response to Claire's thing, just mention, so here's my book, Lead Like Morpheus, which has a brilliant introduction from Mike, by the way, where he talks about Dippy. If you want to ever hear the story of Dippy, you've got to look. But I have this one. Oh, it's not going to show probably because of my green screen. Oh, there it is. Are your questions more important than your answers, Claire? And it's not to say the answers don't matter, but there's something quite profound about getting to the place of actually understanding and almost analyzing the questions that we're asking. Is it the right question? So I mentioned my best friend Jan, who is a university lecturer, and he said the following. He says the following. He says, 90% of what goes wrong in IT is the techie not asking the right question. And he said, when people come up with solutions, he says the first thing he ever asks is, what problem are you solving? And 9 times out of 10, they can't even tell him. They've got a solution, but they actually can't tell him what the problem is. And so also in my book, I have a quote here, again, not going to show very well, but I'll read it to you. This is from GIU Krishnamurti, and GIU said this: to ask the right question is far more important than to receive the answer. The solution of a problem lies in understanding the problem. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't have answers. And Claire, thank you for that. We do need answers. But sometimes we're asking the wrong questions. And I think that has had a profound impact on me. Oh, Karen, we're all onions. Yes, peel back the layers, peel back the layers. Anybody else? What do you want to do with what we've discussed today?
Can I ask maybe, or just get confirmation or not? But now, since we just asked that question of who are you or what do you do, and that life-saving aspect came up, so maybe I should add that to have a little bit more of an emotional connection with my clients or potential clients. I am doing some webinars or being a speaker at some scientific webinars, and they were asking to do a bio, and that's not something that I would put in my bio. And I asked AI to do a bio for me because I'm not very good at that. And it was a good bio, but I don't. Being a South African, I'm Dutch, and ja, Jeffrey, ich kann Deutsch sprechen auch. Ja, und ich war in Holland auch. So I did my study in the Netherlands as well. So I've got the more European character, like being more bold and don't take so much personal. But I understand that the South African culture takes something very personally, very easy. And so I didn't want to be too personal or claiming that I'm a lifesaver. But so many, I mean, even just two weekends ago, the product that I'm giving, that I'm distributing, is actually saved a life at that stage as well. So do you think I should add that somehow? Because of course my business is not just about me, although I'm the sole distributor, I'm the only director. I have a team. I've got an administrator, and I've got the logistics teams and stuff like that. So I never will look myself as the sole person in my business at all. And I wouldn't be able to do this without them. But would you think that I should somehow work this in? Ian. That's something that I might need to change.
So, of course, I'm going to answer your question with some questions, because that's what I'm here to do today. But it doesn't mean I don't have any advice. I just don't really like giving advice, I've realized. But what I would say is this, that I think some of these things are so personal that you may not want to tell them to everybody. There may be a specific audience. So, for example, some of the things I shared with you about what I said, I don't think I would use that in my bio. But I absolutely would use Morpheus, either in my bio or at the beginning of a speech. And I've done this many, many times where I've walked onto a stage and I've just stood there and everybody's kind of going, what's he going to say? Why is he not speaking? And then I go, let me introduce myself. My name is Morpheus. And then I tell the story. And it immediately creates connection, because let's never forget that people buy on emotion. They'll justify it with logic, but they always buy on emotion, and they'll buy on connection. People buy from people. And so to have a very technical introduction, I think, is a big problem. So it's really is, what can I say that is appropriate for this audience and that will polarize this audience towards the people I want and away from the people I don't want as clients? I think those are the kinds of questions we've got to keep asking. That doesn't mean we must be inauthentic. I absolutely believe in authenticity, but I think it was Brene Brown who said, your deepest, darkest secrets, take one of those tiny little post-it notes, those very, very small ones, and write the list of the names of the people that you'll tell your deepest, darkest things on that list. And even then, you might not tell all of them everything. You might tell, this one, this piece, and that one, that piece. So we don't want to just go public with everything. But I do think that the people are inspired by essence. So whether you even phrase it that way, based on the products we sell, some people have called me a lifesaver. I don't know. You need to figure this out. But I would suggest, Stephanie, I think we've met a few times. We've had a few conversations, and there is something of your essence that people need to see, and it's going to increase your sales. And I'm not saying we want to be manipulative, because this is not about manipulation, but it's about authenticity. And I think, so to me, to avoid talking about some of these things, like the fact that you're a lifesaver, that doesn't feel right. But where and how you use it, and it's the how maybe that's the real issue here, not whether you do it or not.
Exactly. No, thank you for that. And I realize that the more you talk about it, that it does make sense to, that's how I will use it. And I mean, the product speaks for itself, and it also already claims saving lives. So that's all good. It all just fits into this picture. Thank you for that.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you, everybody. I know we're kind of pretty much out of time, Chris. I'm very aware of that. But if anybody has, a last takeaway, you want to pop it into the chat, you're welcome to do that. But I've so enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate all of your wisdom that you've shared with us this morning. Thank you.
I'd like to add, consider what cycle we are in, or the business is in. So starting from the beginning, it's very good to ask the questions, and then you can implement them in the business.
Yeah.
If you're in an autumn phase or a winter phase, the reinvention isn't the right time to do it. So I guess, they'd be, what season is the business in, or what cycle, and ask relevant questions in that category.
Thank you so much for that. And just as I hand over to Chris, the reminder I want to give you is asking the right questions of your clients could change your impact and their lives.
Awesome. No, really great feedback and a great session, guys. A little bit of a different session today. So thanks for that, Ian. Really, really much appreciated. And Matthew, thanks for being here. So with that, yeah, we're out of time. And we just want to say thank you for everyone joining us live on the session. Really appreciate all the engagement. It's really been informative. And I'll look at that. Such cool animations, Ian. But yeah, also just want to say to the offline listeners and viewers, Oh, that's cool. Party. I hope everyone will see that online. But yeah, let me just get back to it. So thank you, everyone, the offline listeners and viewers. Really appreciate you guys as well. And that's actually been booming quite much lately. So just appreciate your support. And everyone, we'll see you again next week. So join us again. We'll have a great guest with us. Bye, everyone. Have a great week ahead.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.